So today I'm supposed to be talking about the art of looking. But as a type designer who is constantly using my eyes for looking at anything, these days I can't even read a book. I listen to audiobooks because I get too distracted by the typefaces in the books. So instead, I'm going to talk about the art of not looking. And the thing is, many years ago, when I first started being interested in type, I was doing things like this. I was drawing, looking at historical references, and being really interested in decorative stuff. And today, this is what I do. Most of the time. And if you look at it this way, if you look at it as kind of before and after, you'll be like, oh, it's sad that nowadays she's doing all this boring stuff. But in reality, you look at Latin sans serifs and you think, oh, there's so many of them that are actually quite good already. But when you look at Cyrillic, which is my native script, I actually can't tell you more than 10 typefaces that are even the most simple ones that are actually done well. So why is that? And it's very simple to look at Latin and Cyrillic and think, oh, they're very similar. They should be at the same level. But in fact, one of them has a much longer history, and Cyrillic has the most random series of events that happen to it that I'm gonna talk to you about now. So this is my 10-slide history of Cyrillic that will help you understand what I'm talking about. So the problem is you have a bunch of guys these Byzantium scholars that got invited to invent a script to switch from Greek in the Balkans. And they're like, oh, what are we going to do? Let's come up with something. And that's what they came up with. And obviously, nobody really enjoyed using that. So moving on, we have their students, 7 Bulgarian scholars, which are okay, we can do better. So they come up with something much more reasonable, I would say, based on the Greek, but just reimagining it, adding characters, but much more logical. Okay, they did okay. And then I guess the church, Christian church does this thing, propaganda, spreads the word, monks are writing all these manuscripts, the script changes a lot. And then you jump a few centuries later and you get a very ambitious Russian Tsar who's oh, I don't like how it looks and I don't want Cyrillic to look so religious. I want it to look like what's happening in the West. So he invites a bunch of Dutch guys to modernize Cyrillic. And the Dutch guys are well, we don't know what we're doing. We can't tell what's uppercase and lowercase, so let's just make it all the same. And and that's how Cyrillic ends up looking at the beginning of 1800s, which is very different from what's going on in Latin at the time. And from that point, this is where Cyrillic gets this reputation of looking like small caps, which I hate. But from that point of view, we have this really abrupt sort of change in the way Cyrillic looks, and suddenly Cyrillic is in this stage of oh, okay, we need to catch up with Latin. We're gonna make all these typefaces, and stuff is changing extremely fast. And then, okay, some German and French and foundries decide to get involved in drawing Cyrillic. It's okay, suddenly we can do this now. I'm sure it's almost the same as Latin, so why not? And if you look at display typeface, it's okay, it's fine. They can get away with it. But if you look at text typefaces, this is a German one, it is in fact, this is where things get bad, because suddenly it's like, okay, let's just reuse a bunch of Latin letters, let's just flip things around, like, we don't know what we're doing, but it doesn't matter. And then you also get people, local people, like Bulgarian designers and artists, not being happy about the situation and trying to once again reinvent how Cyrillic is supposed to look like. And all these experiments continue for a very long time, to the point where these days I feel like Cyrillic is still developing. And so if you look at some sort of a contemporary example of Cyrillic like this one, you think, oh, well, like, this is like a classical design. But the reality is that this classical design never existed in this form. So when I have to design Latin and Cyrillic, I have to constantly be going back and forth and thinking about, okay, what works in Latin, what works in Cyrillic, and I feel like this, which is a statue of the Roman god Janus, like the one that January is named after. And it's like a god of like transitions, portals, looking at the past, looking at the future. So I feel like very relevant to the way that all designers work. So yeah, this is why the like sort of relationship between Latin and Cyrillic is not really linear, but rather when I work, I try to constantly be going back and forth between the two. And also between the past and future, and between Latin and Cyrillic. And so when I'm starting a project, what do I have to do when I start a project? And then it's like, okay, look at historical references, look at what's current situation, like what are the typefaces that already exist. And then like I also have to predict the future, because like I'm gonna be spending 2 years doing this typeface, so I have to think about what's gonna be happening in a few years, and then also create something new. And then to add to that, possibly can I make some money out of this and hopefully enjoy the process. So suddenly this line between past and future just turns into anxiety. And to battle this anxiety, obviously, I just have to start doing something. And so on this date, I stumbled upon this specimen, and it's a Russian specimen, and I was like, oh, this looks kind of cute. It definitely doesn't look like something that a Russian, like a native person has made, so it's probably like, judging by the Latin words used, it's probably something German, but I don't know. And I'm also not gonna spend time looking for it, because I'm practicing the art of not looking. So I'm just gonna start doing it. And the thing is, I hate revivals, and I also hate drawing thin weights. So naturally, this made perfect sense at the time. And when I talk about working on Latin and Cyrillic at the same time, I really mean it. I start from the whole set of the full alphabet, and because there's like suddenly a lot more shapes that you have to think about. And then the reason why I hate revivals in Cyrillic is like you get some ridiculous letters that is just like, this is not happening today. It's like, it's cute, but like I have to think about something that works now. So this was a fun side project, so I did a few, I don't know, days on it, and I left it until like 9 months. And then like 9 months later, I was like, okay, what about the serif version? And I just sketched it on the iPad, and I was like, okay, maybe it will be fun to do that. Like, I'm just having fun so far. Like, it looks quite different nowadays, but also not that different. And so I'm doing the serif version now, but it's still just like caps, still just like thin weights. It's all good. I'm really enjoying the process. Nobody enjoys the process of drawing Cyrillic when they get to these particular shapes, the L and the D and the U. And I'm trying to balance them in the two, in the sans and the serif, and also the Bulgarian version. So, okay, finally I come up to the decision. But still, this whole process starts to feel very difficult at this point because I'm constantly going back between sans and serif, and again I feel like this statue, and because I'm like historical references like Art Nouveau, like what is my brief, what is my concept, like what is this typeface going to be used like, and all these things that are constantly on my mind. And this kind of definitely happens again when you start drawing the numbers because they don't follow any system that the letters follow. And then you're like, oh, okay, what am I doing? Maybe I should just like simplify them, make them more normal. I feel like they're getting there now, but not wait. And then at some point, I'm not really, I think I'm starting to practice the art of looking for trouble. Because I suddenly like, oh, but I need more weights, right? It's not going to be only thin. I'm tired of drawing this thin. And how am I going to make nice waterfalls like this one if I don't have a black weights? So I add black weights to the sans and the serif. And sometime later, I'm like, is this enough? Like, is it the end? And I'm like, no, because I'm still having fun. So what about a version that is in between the sans and the serif, like a flared version? Can it exist? Of course, if you try hard enough, you can interpolate anything, and you can make, yeah. So I have a flared version now, which I'm working on. And to remind you about the art of not looking, on this date, I was at the reading room upstairs, and I was actually looking for something completely different at the time. I was doing research on another project. And I happened to finally find the original of this typeface, which was by this Popelbaum foundry that lasted for a very short time in Vienna. And they had like an office in Russia that only lasted for 2 years. So I guess like their Cyrillic typefaces were, most of them, they just left them there after when the war started. So I was like, yeah, wasn't looking, but I found it. And I also found that it has a ton of ligatures, but I hate ligatures, so I will not be doing those. And today, I picked this up again last week, and I was working on it and thinking, okay, like this kind of like sans and serif balance is just killing me, and there's like shapes that I want to keep in the sans, but I want different shapes in the serif, so I was just like separating it and not looking at them at the same time, and suddenly it starts to work because like you can see here like the serif, there's a different N, and the sans has a pointy N, and it's fine. It's okay to do that because nobody is going to be looking at them like that. And then I also have like a different Q for the sans and the serif. And at some point, they switch between one and the other, and it works. Yeah. So right now, it's like somewhere between the past and the future, and I need rest. But I feel like I somehow magically almost there, like, okay, there's historical reference, there's like current situation because people are really into Art Nouveau typefaces right now. So I did actually predict the future. People are also like, oh, we really like variable fonts that are going between sans and serif. I got that. I am still enjoying the process. I am creating something that is fairly new, or like there's not that many examples. I don't know if I'm gonna make money out of it, but we'll see. Yeah.